Life on the water begins quietly. So quietly, in fact, that most people don't realize how much sound exists beneath the silence. The soft creak of wood adjusting to temperature, the distant slap of water against the hull, the faint hum of a generator somewhere below the floor dot at first. It feels peaceful, like the world has finally slowed down enough to match your breathing. People imagine houseboat living as an escape from rent, from traffic, from crowded streets and noisy neighbors. They imagine mornings wrapped in mist, coffee steaming in hand, sunlight dancing across the water like liquid gold, and sometimes that image is real. But what almost no one imagines is what happens after the novelty fades. After the first few weeks, after the water stops feeling magical and starts feeling permanent, because when your home floats, stability becomes a concept rather than a guarantee. Living on a houseboat year-round means accepting that nothing is ever fully still. The floor beneath your feet moves, even when you think it doesn't. Your walls respond to wind. Your windows respond to waves and slowly, without realizing it, your body begins to adapt. Your balance changes. Your sleep changes. Your sense of safety changes. On land, safety feels fixed. On water, safety feels earned. Every single day. There are mornings when the lake looks like glass, when the horizon melts into the sky and the world feels gentle. And then there are mornings when you wake up already tired, already listening for problems. Did the water level rise overnight? Are the mooring lines still tight? Does that sound normal or new? Houseboat living teaches you to listen differently. You don't just hear, you interpret. A rhythmic knock might be waves, or it might be something loose. A faint vibration could be the engine settling, or a warning you'll wish you hadn't ignored. People who live on the water learn quickly that prevention is survival. Small problems are never small for long. A loose bolt becomes a leak. A leak becomes damage. Damage becomes danger. And unlike a house on land, there's no solid ground beneath you as backup. The water is both your foundation and your threat. Winter is often when the illusion finally breaks. Cold doesn't just surround a houseboat, it invades it. It creeps through thin insulation, metal fittings, exposed pipes. It turns flexibility into brittleness. It turns water into pressure. Frozen pipes don't burst politely. They fail suddenly, violently, and often when you least expect it. And when water escapes inside a floating home, panic arrives fast. Not dramatic panic. Focused panic, the kind that sharpens your movements and silences unnecessary thoughts. You learn where every valve is. You learn which tools matter most. You learn how fast things can go wrong. On land, help feels close. On water, help feels conditional. Weather decides if assistance can reach you. Distance decides how long it will take. And sometimes you realize you're entirely on your own. Storms don't feel cinematic on a houseboat. They feel personal. Wind presses against your home like a living force. Waves test every joint, every line, every decision you ever made about where and how you anchored yourself. At night, storms feel longer, darker, louder. Sleep comes in fragments. You wake at every strong gust, every unfamiliar sound. Your mind runs scenarios you didn't know you were capable of imagining. What if a line snaps? What if the anchor drags? What if the engine won't start? You don't panic, you prepare. You lie there rehearsing movements in your head. Where you'll go first, what you'll grab, what you'll sacrifice if you have to choose. Houseboat living quietly teaches you something most people never learn. Comfort is temporary. Awareness is permanent. Summer brings relief, but not ease. Heat behaves differently on water. It reflects upward, traps itself, lingers. Humidity seeps into fabrics, wood, and electronics. Mold doesn't knock, it appears. Insects treat your home like shared territory. They don't care that this is your kitchen, your bedroom, your life. Maintenance never pauses. It only changes shape. You scrape. You seal. You tighten. You check. You recheck. And in between all of it, you live. You cook while balancing instinctively. You shower while monitoring water usage. You plan errands based on weather windows instead of convenience. Grocery runs feel heavier because everything must be carried across docks. Trash feels more deliberate because disposal isn't automatic. Every action has weight. Social life shifts too. Spontaneity becomes rare. Visitors hesitate. Some friends fade quietly, unsure how to fit into a lifestyle they don't understand. But others lean in. They sit longer. They listen more. They ask better questions. And when night falls on the water, something changes. The world grows quieter than most people ever experience. No traffic hum. No distant sirens. Just water, wind, and your own thoughts. It's beautiful. And sometimes unsettling, because silence gives emotions room to expand. Living afloat magnifies everything you carry inside. Peace feels deeper. Loneliness feels sharper. Fear feels more honest. You can't escape yourself on the water. There's nowhere to rush to. Nowhere to hide in noise. Over time, people either learn to sit with themselves, or they decide the water is asking too much. And this is where many stories quietly end. Not with disaster, not with drama, but with realization. That year-round houseboat living isn't about romance. It's about resilience. It's about choosing uncertainty every morning and still making coffee, still fixing what's broken, still watching the sun rise as if balance is possible. And for those who stay, who adapt, who learn the language of water, something rare begins to happen. The challenges don't disappear, but they stop feeling like enemies. They start feeling like teachers. Asterisk, the lessons don't arrive all at once. They unfold slowly, often disguised as inconvenience. A failed battery that teaches patience. A snapped rope that teaches respect. A drifting night that teaches humility. And gradually, almost without noticing, life on the water begins to reshape how you think about time on land. Time is measured in schedules, appointments, deadlines, traffic lights, and calendars. On water, time is measured in conditions. You learn to ask different questions. Not what time should we leave, but what is the wind doing? Not can we do this tomorrow, but will the water allow it? Plans become flexible by necessity. Rigid thinking doesn't survive long out here. This flexibility seeps into your personality. You become calmer in some ways and more alert in others. Because even on calm days, The water is never fully predictable. People often underestimate how mentally demanding it is to live in a place that can move, shift, and respond to forces you cannot control. There's a low-level awareness that never turns off, a background process in the mind, constantly scanning for changes. It's not anxiety, at least not in the traditional sense. It's vigilance. The kind that soldiers, sailors, and pilots understand. The understanding that environments can change without warning, and readiness matters. At first, this vigilance is exhausting. Your mind feels crowded. Your sleep feels shallow, but then something surprising happens. Your awareness sharpens. Your reactions become smoother. You stop overthinking and start responding. Houseboat living rewards competence, not perfection. Competence. Knowing how to secure your home, knowing when to stay put, knowing when to move, when to wait, when to act. Mistakes still happen. They always will, but mistakes stop feeling like failures and start feeling like tuition. Paid lessons and education you never enrolled in but can't opt out of. Space on a houseboat changes your relationship with belongings. You don't have room for excess. Every item must justify its existence. If it doesn't serve a purpose, it becomes a burden. If it breaks easily, it becomes a risk. Minimalism stops being a trend and becomes survival logic. You learn the value of redundancy. 2 flashlights instead of 1. Backup tools. Extra lines. Spare parts. Because when something fails at the wrong moment, replacement isn't immediate. Power outages feel different on the water. Silence becomes absolute. Darkness feels heavier. Generators are lifelines, not conveniences. And when they fail, priorities become clear very quickly. Heat, light, communication. Everything else fades. Water. Management becomes a constant conversation in your head. Fresh water is finite. Waste must be handled carefully. You become acutely aware of consumption. Long showers disappear. Careless habits vanish. Every drop matters. This awareness often carries back into other parts of life. You waste less. You appreciate more because living afloat strips away the illusion of endless resources. Isolation deepens during long stretches of bad weather. Days when leading the boat feels risky. Weeks when the dock feels far away, even if it's only a short distance. Loneliness doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles quietly. You notice it when conversations feel shorter, when voices on the radio feel strangely comforting, when sunsets feel less like beauty and more like punctuation. Some people fill the silence with noise, music, podcasts, background sound. Others lean into it. They sit on deck and let the water speak. Both approaches are valid. Both are attempts to stay grounded in a place where ground doesn't exist. Relationships change on a houseboat. They have to. Conflict has nowhere to hide. Space is limited. Privacy is negotiated, not assumed. Small irritations can feel larger. Unspoken tension can feel heavier, but connection can also deepen faster than it ever would on land. Shared responsibility creates shared identity. You don't just live together. You survive together. And survival has a way of clarifying what matters. Storms become shared memories. That calm doesn't arrive suddenly. It grows quietly, shaped by repetition and reflection. After enough storms, enough repairs, enough nights spent listening to the water instead of sleeping, something settles inside you. Not certainty, but acceptance. You stop expecting the water to behave. You stop wishing conditions were different. Instead, you meet each day as it is dawn. If the morning is calm, you appreciate it without clinging to it. If the wind rises, you prepare without resentment. Life afloat teaches you that resistance wastes energy. Adaptation conserves it. This shift spills into how you think about risk. On land, risk often feels abstract. On water, it feels immediate that you learn to assess situations quickly and honestly. You don't exaggerate danger, but you never dismiss it either. This balanced awareness becomes second nature. People who live year-round on houseboats often struggle to explain this mindset to others. Words feel insufficient. It's something you carry in your posture, your reactions, your decisions. You notice it when you return to land for extended periods. How loud everything feels. How rushed conversations are. How people confuse motion with progress. On the water, stillness has value. Waiting is not weakness. Observation is action. Houseboat living retrains your nervous system. Your tolerance for uncertainty increases. Your tolerance for unnecessary stress decreases. You become selective. With commitments, with energy, with attention, because out there, attention keeps you afloat. Over the years, many houseboaters develop a quiet reverence for maintenance. What once felt tedious begins to feel grounding. Cleaning the deck becomes a moment of connection. Checking lines becomes a ritual of care. Listening to systems becomes a form of conversation. You stop seeing the boat as an object and start seeing it as a living system, one that responds to neglect and rewards care. This relationship teaches responsibility without punishment. Consequences are real but fair. Neglect leads to problems. Attention leads to longevity. Few environments teach this lesson so clearly. The seasons continue their cycle, indifferent to preference. Cold returns. Heat returns. Storms return, but they no longer feel like intrusions. They feel like chapters. Winter becomes a time of introspection. Movement slows. Maintenance becomes more deliberate. Summer becomes expansive but demanding. Life feels fuller and heavier. Spring and autumn offer balance. Brief reminders of harmony. Through all of it, the water remains. Always moving. Always present. And one day, often without announcement, people realize they've changed. The things that once frightened them now feel manageable. The things that once mattered feel optional. They no longer chase comfort. They cultivate capability. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes honest. Houseboat living strips away illusions about safety, about control, about permanence. It reveals a truth many people avoid. Everything floats on something uncertain. Houses on land feel solid, but rely on systems just as fragile. Jobs feel stable until they're not. Routines feel permanent until they change. Living on the water makes this reality visible. Impossible to ignore Dot, and in seeing it clearly, fear loses some of its power, because when you accept impermanence, you stop being shocked by it. People often ask houseboaters if they feel afraid living this way. The honest answer is complicated. Fear exists, but it doesn't dominate. It informs. It sharpens decisions. It encourages preparation. And then it steps aside. This is the quiet gift of life afloat. Not freedom from fear, but freedom from denial. As years pass, some choose to remain indefinitely. Others decide to return to land. Both carry the water with them. And how they respond to stress, and how they approach problems, and how they value simplicity. The houseboat becomes a chapter not defined by hardship, but by transformation. Those who leave often miss the silence most. The way nights felt expansive, the way mornings arrived without urgency. Those who stay often stop explaining their choice. They no longer need justification. They know what this life asks of them, and they know what it gives back. Living year-round on a houseboat is not about escape. It is about engagement. Engagement with nature, with responsibility, with reality. It demands presence. It rewards awareness, and it reminds those who listen that stability is not found in stillness, but in balance. Balance between caution and courage, between preparation and acceptance, between effort and surrender. As the water moves beneath the hull, carrying the houseboat forward without asking permission, life continues, not anchored to certainty, not immune to change, but afloat. And sometimes that is enough, because in a world obsessed with control, choosing to live where control is never guaranteed teaches a rare and enduring lesson. You don't need solid ground beneath you to live with steadiness. You just need awareness, respect, and the willingness to move with what comes. People think stability comes from solid ground, but sometimes it comes from learning how to float. Out here, nothing pretends to be permanent, and that honesty changes you. The water doesn't promise safety. It only offers truth. When you live where control is never guaranteed, you stop chasing certainty and start building balance. Life afloat doesn't make you fearless. It makes you aware. And awareness is what keeps you steady when everything moves. People often ask what it feels like to live on the water. They expect a simple answer: peaceful, free, beautiful. But the truth doesn't fit into one word, because living afloat doesn't give you peace. It teaches you how to sit with unrest. It doesn't remove fear. It shows you how fear behaves when you stop running from it. Out here, nothing pretends to be permanent. The water doesn't lie to you. It doesn't promise stability. It doesn't pretend tomorrow will look like today. And somehow, that honesty becomes comforting, When your home floats, you stop believing in guarantees. You stop assuming safety exists by default. You stop expecting the world to hold still for you instead. You learn how to hold yourself steady while everything else moves. There is a quiet moment most people experience after living on the water long enough. It doesn't come during a storm. It doesn't come during fear. It comes during stillness. A moment when the water is calm, the air is quiet, and nothing demands your attention. And instead of relief, something deeper appears. Awareness. You realize how alert you've become, how tuned your body is to small changes, how silence no longer feels empty. You notice the way your breathing matches the movement beneath you. You notice how your balance has changed, how your mind no longer rushes ahead of the present moment. Life afloat teaches you presence not through meditation, but through necessity, because distraction has consequences here. Neglect has consequences. Assumptions have consequences. On land, mistakes are often delayed. On water, they are immediate. And that immediacy sharpens you. You begin to understand that comfort isn't the absence of danger. It's the ability to respond when danger arrives. There is a humility that grows when you live somewhere that could undo you if you become careless. Not a fearful humility, but a respectful one. You stop seeing yourself as separate from your environment. You stop believing you're above it, you become part of it. The water doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care about your schedule. It doesn't care about your expectations. And slowly, you stop caring about forcing those things to. Instead, you learn to ask better questions. Not, how do I control this? But how do I move with this? Not, how do I make this safe forever? But how do I stay ready? That shift changes everything. Because readiness is lighter than control. And acceptance weighs less than resistance. People who live on the water learn something most people never have to learn. That stability is not something you stand on. It's something you practice. You practice it when you check the lines one more time. You practice it when you listen instead of rushing. You practice it when you admit uncertainty instead of pretending confidence. And with enough practice, stability becomes internal. You carry it with you. Even on nights when the wind howls. Even when the boat rocks harder than expected. Even when fear whispers all the things that could go wrong. You don't silence that voice. You acknowledge it. And then you act anyway. This is not bravery. This is familiarity. Fear loses its sharp edge when you know what to do with it. Living afloat doesn't make you stronger in dramatic ways. It makes you steadier in quiet ones. You stop overreacting. You stop under-preparing. You stop assuming life should be easier than it is. And that acceptance brings a surprising calm. There are moments, sitting alone on deck, when you realize how much noise has left your life. Not just sound, but mental noise. The constant urgency, the constant comparison, the constant pressure to be somewhere else. Repairs become shared victories. Quiet nights become shared anchors. Some relationships don't survive the pressure. Others emerge stronger, reshaped by challenge. The water doesn't care which outcome occurs. It applies pressure evenly. Fear changes shape over time. Early fear is sharp and dramatic. Later fear becomes quieter, more precise. You stop fearing the water itself. You start fearing complacency. The moment you assume things will be fine. The moment you skip a check. The moment you ignore a feeling that something isn't right. Houseboat living teaches you to trust your instincts, not blindly, but attentively. You learn the difference between imagination and intuition, between unnecessary worry and necessary action. And then slowly confidence begins to grow. Not arrogance, not recklessness, confidence rooted in experience. You've weathered storms. You've fixed failures. You've adapted when plans collapsed. You no longer feel like a visitor on the water. You feel like a participant. Belonging doesn't come from ownership out here. It comes from understanding how the boat responds, understanding how the water behaves, understanding your own limits. And that understanding brings a strange kind of peace, not the peace of certainty, but the peace of preparedness. As months turn into years, life afloat stops feeling temporary. It becomes normal. And that's when the biggest challenge emerges. Comfort dulls awareness. Routine dulls caution. The same environment that once demanded constant attention now feels familiar enough to be ignored. This is when experienced houseboaters become most vulnerable. Not because they know less, but because they assume they know enough. The water waits patiently for that moment. And when it arrives, it reminds you. Gently if you're lucky, forcefully if you're not, because life afloat is not about mastering the water. It's about staying in conversation with it, listening, adjusting, respecting, and those who forget that lesson often relearn it the hard way. Yet despite everything, the maintenance, the isolation, the storms, the constant awareness, many people stay, not because it's easy, but because it's honest. Life on the water strips away illusions. It leaves you with what you can manage, what you can fix, what you can endure, and in that stripped down existence, many find something they never had on land. Clarity. Over time, something subtle begins to change inside people who live on the water long enough. Their sense of control shifts. On land, control feels like ownership, walls, locks, property lines. On the water, control feels more like cooperation. You don't dominate the environment, you negotiate with it. Every decision becomes a conversation with forces larger than you, and strangely, this realization can feel liberating. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you start paying attention instead. You notice patterns, you notice rhythms, the way the wind shifts before a storm, the way birds behave when weather is coming, the way the boat subtly leans when weight distribution changes. Your home talks to you, not in words, but in sensations. The floor vibrates differently when the generator struggles. The hull sounds sharper when waves hit at the wrong angle. The ropes hum under tension when water levels rise. At first, these sensations feel overwhelming. Later, they feel informative. Houseboat living sharpens perception in ways modern life rarely requires. It reconnects people with instincts dulled by convenience, and with that reconnection comes vulnerability. You become acutely aware of how thin the line is between stability and chaos, how quickly conditions can shift, how little margin for error exists when your home floats. This awareness doesn't fade. It matures. Fear evolves into respect. Anxiety evolves into preparedness. And preparedness becomes a quiet confidence. But confidence doesn't protect. Against exhaustion. There are days when the constant responsibility feels heavy. When every system needing attention feels like another weight on your chest. Because on a houseboat, there is no true day off. Even rest requires awareness. You might sit on the deck, watching the water ripple under sunlight, and still find part of your mind listening, still scanning, still alert. That mental load accumulates slowly, almost INVISIBLY. And eventually, it demands to be acknowledged. Some people cope by creating rituals, morning checks, evening routines. They walk the deck the same way each day. They touch the same lines. They listen for the same sounds. These rituals provide reassurance, not because nothing goes wrong, but because they reduce surprise. Others cope by simplifying even further. Fewer possessions, fewer commitments, fewer expectations. Life afloat naturally trims excess. What remains feels essential. Yet even with simplicity, unpredictability remains constant. Unexpected costs arrive without warning. A failed engine part, a corroded fitting, a storm that damages what seemed secure. Financial planning on the water is different. Expenses don't follow calendars, they follow conditions. Savings aren't optional. They are flotation devices of their own kind. People quickly learn that romance doesn't pay for repairs. Only preparation does. And still, despite the challenges, moments of profound beauty continue to appear. Sunsets that feel unreal. Mornings so still they seem suspended in time. Water reflecting the sky so perfectly that horizon disappears. These moments don't erase the hardships. They contextualize them. They remind people why they stay, because life on the water offers something increasingly rare, a direct relationship with reality. No filters. No buffers. When it's cold, you feel it. When it's calm, you feel it. When it's dangerous, you know it immediately. There's no illusion of separation. This intimacy with environment reshapes values. Success stops looking like accumulation. Happiness stops looking like comfort. Instead, meaning emerges from competence, from resilience, from alignment with forces rather than resistance to them. And yet, houseboat living also reveals limits. Not everyone is meant to live this way forever. Some discover that the water demands more than they're willing to give. There's no shame in that. Realization, leaving the water doesn't mean failure. It means honesty. Others stay longer than they should, mistaking endurance for fulfillment. Confusing survival with satisfaction, the water does not judge either choice. It remains indifferent, but people feel the difference internally. Burnout on the water is quiet but real. It shows up as irritability, as numbness, as detachment from moments that once felt magical. This is when reflection becomes necessary. Why am I here? What am I gaining? What am I losing? Houseboat living forces these questions because distractions are limited. The environment keeps asking them even when you don't want to answer. Some respond by recalibrating. They adjust routines. They seek support. They travel less aggressively. Others decide it's time to return to land, bringing with them lessons the ground-bound world rarely teaches: patience, resourcefulness, respect for systems. And a deep understanding that stability is never guaranteed anywhere. Those who remain year after year begin to notice another shift. The water starts to feel less like an obstacle and more like a companion, not a friend, not an enemy, a presence, something that shapes life rather than opposes it. They stop asking if the water will cooperate. They ask how they can move with it. This mindset changes everything. Storms still come. Repairs still happen. Fear still appears when conditions demand it. But resistance fades, and with it, suffering softens. Life afloat becomes less about struggle and more about rhythm. The rhythm of checking lines. The rhythm of weather windows. The rhythm of movement and stillness. Time stops feeling like something to chase. It becomes something to inhabit. And perhaps this is the greatest, least expected challenge of year-round houseboat living. Learning to live without rushing. To accept that progress is not linear. That comfort is temporary. That balance is dynamic. This lesson, once learned, does not stay on the water. It follows people back to land, into relationships, into work, into quiet moments when the world feels unstable again. Because after living afloat, instability no longer feels foreign. It feels familiar. And familiarity breeds calm.